Okay, you guys, what is up? The King of Lightning is here today to do One Piece episode 567 review. So before I get started, of course, look down below in the description for the preview of next week's episode of 568, the fan page, and the actual link to this week's episode of One Piece 567, as well as One Piece Official. Now, that being said, this week's episode is important. It's important to the overall story. Very important to the overall story. Because it lets us know a few things as well as hints at a few things. So that's why this overall rating for this episode is going to be a good. But basically, the overall plot of this episode is very simple. Luffy is destroying the ship, and everyone is hoping that he destroys it in time before Noah crashes down on the island and destroys Fishman Island. It's that simple. Because what we see here, and brief summary, all right, a very brief summary. Basically, the other Straw Hats have taken care of Huzo, Zeon, and the rest of the Fishman, the new Fishman officers, and Wadasume was taken care of by Jinbei and Sanji. And then everyone's surprised that they took down the officers. They took down the officers so easily. At the same time, the bubble guys in the bubble room announced to the whole entire island that Luffy had just defeated Hody Jones. Now, the thing here is that what happens is that they notice how Noah is still falling down. But the bubble guys inform everyone that Luffy is in the process of destroying the ship. But they still decide to abandon the island because, that makes sense. And what happens is that one person, he decides to stay because he remembered 20 years ago when he was a kid, another human did the same thing. Another human protected Fishman Island from people who were causing havoc on the island, and that person was Whitebeard. And we see Whitebeard, and he, Whitebeard doing his thing, all this shit, and so basically, we see the influence of humans on the island throughout the course of the island's history. And what happens here is that everyone, they start to realize that Luffy's actually like a really we have to stay here because we're fishermen, we're mermen and mermaids. And this is our home, yet a human who we're supposed to, loathe and hate is actually helping us survive. So, they have to stay on the island and show respect to that. And what happens here is that, Madame Shirley has her premonition again, and then she sees Luffy in fire and shit. So, and I guess she's doubting if that premonition was accurate because she sees Luffy actually saving the island as opposed to destroying the island. But there is a thing on this, and the fact of the matter is that her predictions are never wrong, ever wrong. At some point in time, they will come true. So this lets us know that in the future of the series, Luffy and his crew will return to Fishman Island at some point in time. Because, again, her predictions are always right. And Luffy at some point will destroy Fishman Island. Which means that his crew, once they go to the new world, at some point, they're going to come back to Fishman Island at some point in time. We're not too sure when, but, we'll find out later on as the series progresses. And then, what happens here is that we get scenes of Luffy, alright? And Luffy is pummeling. When I say pummeling, he's beating the shit out of Noah. I mean, he is, this Gatling was very impressive. Very impressive. This Gatling, especially the Gatling itself, was well more animated than last week's episode when they did the whole entire elephant Gatling. But it's still that was still good, and this one was still good. It was like a river of no, not a river. It was like rainfall of these giant metal fists. They're just cracking Noah like bam, 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 bam. So very cool shit. And what happens here is that Luffy, he is really trying to tire us out, and his wound, and he keeps on just oozing out all this blood and shit. It's like blood just keeps on coming and coming and coming out. And then Shiroshi sees that, and she's like, Luffy, you're you're wounded, your wound is open, and then he's like, stay there, Shiroshi, stay there, I'm not done yet. I need to save this island. And he keeps on pounding the island and shit, keeps on going down, and bam, 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 bam. And what happens here is that at some point, he actually gets to the point where he's yelling and shit, his eyes are closed and glazed over and shit, but he's still doing the Gatling. And at some point, he hears a voice. He's like, and the voice is like, stop. And all of a sudden he's like, what the hell was that? So he looks around and shit, and all of a sudden, like this big thing, like this big shadow encompasses the ship, and it's kind of like he's like, "Who the hell is that?" And then, but Luffy's still doing the Gatling, and he's still bleeding, and then all of a sudden, Shirahoshi dives in there, cuts him off and shit, and it's like, "Stop, Luffy, stop!" And Luffy's like, "What the fuck are you doing? I need to go save your people." But then she's like, "No, it's fine, no, it's fine," and she's crying and shit, like, like, "No, it's fine, it's fine." And then he looks around, and he sees Island-class Sea Kings holding Noah up by the chains. And then Luffy's like, "Oh, okay, alright, okay," and then passes out and falls down to the bottom of Noah. And at the same time, Shirahoshi, she's gonna go chase Luffy, but then one of the Sea Kings says it's alright. And what happens is that we see Shirahoshi and the Sea Kings communicating with each other. And because she is, quote-unquote, the only person to talk to Sea Kings. And what happens here is that the Sea Kings tell her that we sensed your will to save the island through Luffy's determination to save the island. Because she wanted Luffy to succeed. And that strong urge for having him try to succeed in saving the island, it emanated throughout I guess it emanated or resonated with the Sea Kings. And so they felt that, and then they came and assisted Luffy in saving the island. And what happens here is that one of the Sea Kings state that, they state that they are her power. Like when she calls, they will come and aid her as best as they can. And that there is the end of the episode. Because then we see Luffy and shit, like, he's passed out on Mount Noah. And then Shirahoshi looks at the Sea King, smiles, and then right there, the episode ends. So, again, overall, this episode is going to be a good. And the reason why is very simple. Because there are a lot of things in this whole entire Sea King scene that are very key to the overall story. The first thing is that Luffy heard the voice of the Sea Kings. And we know from legend that the only person who should be able to hear the Sea Kings is the mermaid who has a connection to them. But Luffy also heard the voice of the Sea Kings, which shouldn't be possible. So this hints at a Goldie Roger moment, because Goldie Roger, quote-unquote by Rayleigh, had the ability to hear everything. Once again, Goldie Roger had the ability to hear everything. And Luffy, at this point in time, is hearing something that normally he should not, according to legend, but he is. So right there is also a key. Like that right there signifies that at some point in the series, Luffy may also gain the ability to hear everything. So we may in fact have Luffy at some point reading poneglyphs or understanding poneglyphs, because he can hear the essence of the poneglyph, just how Goldie Roger could back on Sky Island. So again, that's a very key moment right there. Number two is that the Sea Kings are actually talking amongst themselves, which again, is very important. And Shirahoshi, which means that Shirahoshi's ability to control the Sea Kings is valid. Okay? And the ability to control the Sea Kings is going to be, very important as this arc continues. Like once this arc reaches the final episodes, you're going to see how important it is for Shirahoshi to talk to Sea Kings. Shirahoshi, to the overall story of One Piece, is actually a very important character to the overall story. And the key here is the fact that she can talk to Sea Kings. That's number two. Number three is that the Sea Kings picked up Noah by the metal chains. This lets me know that the metal chains themselves were designed for the sole purpose for Sea Kings to carry Noah. Which means that from the beginning, Noah was already designed for Sea Kings to pull it. That was the original design of Noah. Which means that Noah was supposed to be able to lift it, like the Sea Kings were the ones who were supposed to take Noah to the surface when the time was right. When Joy Boy signified that the time was right. So that's number three. And again, this is very important, because if Luffy does destroy Fishman Island, then the inhabitants of Fishman Island will probably be carried by Noah and be directed by the Sea Kings via Shirahoshi. So it's the chain of how important shit is to the actual series. And that's why this episode is so key, because it lets us know a few things as well as hints at a few things. So right there is my overall review. The pacing of the episode, it wasn't, you know, like, it wasn't that great, but the animation, I thought that it was, you know, it was better because we see the actual rain of elephant guns, and they're coming down nice and smooth, you know, and, you know, again, it was much better, in my opinion, than last week's episode. Even though last week was pretty damn awesome, in my opinion, this week, the animation was better. The intensity of Luffy was there. Like, you could see Luffy was, like, really going in. Like, at some point, like, he was just yelling and shit. Like, you could see the veins in his head, like, pulsating and shit, because all the blood was, you know, circulating really, really fucking fast. And then at some point, when we see him stop the Gatling, and he holds on to the Noah ship, we see, like, a river of blood come down his chest. So, clearly, he has lost an immense amount of blood, and he passed out because of that reason. Now, next week's episode is going to be Luffy, and he needs a transfusion of blood, and we're going to see that play out, and the character who's going to give him the transfusion of blood. But that right there is the end of my review, so I'll see you guys later. Be sure to, of course, rate, comment, and subscribe as always, and once again, look down below for the preview of next week's episode of One Piece, the actual link to this week's episode of One Piece, One Piece Official, and of course my Facebook fan page, all in the description down below. And I'm signing out. Peace. Have a nice day.